How's it going, everybody? Again, it's Jackson Hinkle standing in for George Galloway tonight on the mother of all talk shows. And we've got some really important subjects to discuss. If you watch the mainstream media, you probably wouldn't notice, but the rest of the 21st century is being decided today as President Vladimir Putin flies to the UAE, which actually is where George Galloway is right now. He's having meetings. Mr. Putin's having meetings with the UAE government. He's since flown to Saudi Arabia, and he's meeting with Mohammed bin Salman. And he was received in both of these countries with ceremonies, the likes of which we've never seen before. In fact, he was running off the plane to go and give a big handshake to Mohammed bin Salman. Unlike Joe Biden, and he didn't fall on his way down those plane steps to meet with MBS. After that, he's going back to Moscow to meet with the president of Iran tomorrow. Again, I really do mean it when I say that the world is changing right before our very eyes. All the while, the mainstream media is ignoring it. They're choosing to hide it from the public. The public understands in my country, in the United States, as well as in wherever you probably live, if you're in a Western state right now, that the economic situation is not great. The EU is in the middle of an inflation crisis, an economic crisis, and in many countries, a recession. In the United States, we have 600,000 homeless individuals sleeping out on the streets each and every night, 60,000 of whom are homeless veterans who served our country abroad. Of course, the state of the U.S. dollar and the euro is not too great either. And Joe Biden's not helping that situation by continuing to ostracize the United States and all other Western governments on the global stage from BRICS partners like Russia, China, and newly added Saudi Arabia and Iran, for example. The situation is quite grim, and that's why they're hiding the truth from you. When it comes to Russia, when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to the situation in the Arab states, and when it comes to even in Latin America with what we're going to be talking about tonight in Venezuela, we can see, whatever the mainstream media is selling is a lie, but we can see that the multipolar world is taking shape. The British Empire is dead. The era of unipolarity by the United States is over, and the rest of the world, for the first time, is getting a chance to breathe. The boot is being removed from their neck. So let's take a look at these events and break down what's happened. When it comes to the war in Ukraine, you were all told that the United States and the Western partners would support Ukraine for as long as it took to score a victory over the Russian Federation. Now, if you have half a brain and at least two working brain cells, you know that that was a lie on its face, because the U.S. is going to do what it always does, and the U.K. is going to do that as well. And that means they are going to use Ukraine as a pawn in this proxy battle for as long as they want to, and then throw Zelensky to the curb. Okay, but before they do that, of course, they're going to be funneling him millions and millions of dollars and all his cronies as well. And that's exactly what we're seeing play out right now. This very week, the U.S. State Department has come out and announced that the rope that they've set for the supply of Ukraine funds is running short. That if the U.S. Congress doesn't take action and supply more funds to Ukraine, which I'm sure they probably will, that the Ukraine war will have to come to an end. Right now, secret negotiations are reportedly taking place between the Russian Federation and Ukraine and their Western handlers. And of course, as we all assumed, these negotiations are entertaining nothing other than exactly what Putin wanted. We were asked at the start of this war, free thinkers like you and me, we were asked, how is this war going to end? Lots of people didn't trust the mainstream media narrative because they've already been lied to about COVID. They've been lied to about Russiagate. They've been lied to about a whole host of subjects going back decades and decades and decades. And the free thinkers said, well, if you look at Russia, they scored a huge victory in the bloodiest war of all time against Nazi Germany in World War II. They scored a huge victory against Napoleon in that war as well, which was opened on their Western front. And now they're probably going to score a huge victory against Ukraine. Russia has a population 4 times the size of Ukraine. Again, you don't need to be a brainiac to understand what was going to happen. All the while, the mainstream media told you that Ukraine's winning. We're going to supply them with the funds and the military weaponry that they need to win at whatever cost and for however long it takes. But the facts didn't pan out. Today, as I sit here 88,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory has now been integrated into the Russian Federation. That's forever gone. The maps have changed. And that's what the multipolar world looks like. When it comes to the death toll, this is something that many of us warned about and pleaded for peace over because we knew the death toll was going to be so high. As it stands today, over 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers, men and women, are dead. Probably 150,000 Russian soldiers are dead as well. Those deaths never had to happen, but they did because the West got cocky. The West believed that they could tell the rest of the world how to live, how to accept life, how they'll be governed, what currencies they're going to use, what border disputes they're going to raise a fist over, and that would be that. But again, some leaders have balls. Vladimir Putin, he has balls, and he said, no, that's not how it's going to be. You're going to respect our country, you're going to respect our ambitions, and you're going to respect mainly those ethnic Russians in the Donbass that are being slaughtered and have been slaughtered for the past 8 years, in which Russia has tried to push forward negotiations. Okay, well, now we're beginning to see the writing on the wall. Even U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham has come out and announced that he'd rather see the U.S. Congress focus on issues such as the U.S. border rather than the Ukrainian border. I never thought I'd live to see the day in which Lindsey Graham says something like that. He's the same guy who visited Kiev and met with President Zelensky, the puppet of the West, and told him that every dollar spent towards Ukraine is a dollar well spent because it's bringing about dead Russians. And now he even sounds like the Putin propagandist that he condemned months ago. Let's shift gears and look at what's happened in Israel. The Trump administration tried to push through the Abraham Accords, which was a much more long-winded effort than just his administration. And the Abraham Accords were an effort to normalize relations between all of these Arab Gulf states and Israel. They almost succeeded in that effort. They almost pushed the issue of Palestinian resistance out of the forefront of history for the remainder of eternity. It wasn't until October 7th took place and events which were, albeit tragic, showed the world that the Palestinian resistance was not over. The world once again heard the cries, heard the screams of the innocent Palestinians who were being locked away in Israeli prisons, who were being tortured, who were being killed, bones being broken in those Israeli prisons. They heard the cries and the pleas for fresh air from those Palestinians who were suffering in the open-air prison in Gaza. And they also began to reflect on the stories of the Palestinians in the West Bank, 173 of whom were killed before October 7th in 2023 alone. I always find it funny and really sad that there's so many individuals who will tell you that, well, Jackson, you can't possibly support the Palestinian resistance because they started this war. They started this war. Why were there no Arab Gulf states? Why were there no Arab states that were frustrated, that were launching attacks against the West or our Western partners before 1948? They tell you, but Jackson, you must condemn Hamas. If we wipe Hamas off the face of the earth, we will have peace in the Middle East. It's achievable. Well, if that's true, why was there not peace in the Middle East before 1987 when the organization of Hamas was established? They say, well, Jackson, okay, at the least, you have to be able to acknowledge that what took place on October 7th was the start of this war, and every death that has taken place in Gaza, in the West Bank, is on the hands of Hamas. There was a truce before October 7th, Jackson. Was there? I don't understand how a truce before October 7th could have resulted in, again, between 100 and 300 deaths in the West Bank alone before October 7th in 2023. That doesn't sound like any truce that I want to be a part of. But the Palestinian resistance is putting their best foot forward, and the rest of the world is waking up to what's going on. Vladimir Putin has shipped tons and tons and tons of humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza, and just today, again, he met with the leaders of the UAE and Saudi Arabia and reestablished his support for the creation of a sovereign, independent Palestinian state on the 1967 borders. States all across the world fail to recognize Israel's statehood, but do recognize Palestine. It's really interesting what's happening. For the first time in my lifetime, I'm born in 1999, the rest of the world is not bending the knee to the West. They're not going along with whatever preconceived notions and narratives they've established about how the world has to run. They're saying, no, we are going to fight for our sovereignty. We are going to fight for our independence. We're going to fight for our future. That's what the Palestinians are doing. Despite how many lies, falsehoods, and outright fabrications the Zionists put forward, the truth is coming to the surface. Now, I'm not necessarily hopeful for the plight of the Palestinian people and the plight of the people in Gaza. Make no mistake about it. They've got a very tough road ahead of them. They've got a tough road ahead of them because of the fact that the U.S. is continuing to supply Israel with all the weaponry, all of the aid, and all of the missiles that they need to continue this genocide, despite the fact that over 16,000 individuals have been killed in Gaza thus far. And if you want to challenge me on that fact, do it. Because just today, the Times of Israel reported a source from the IDF, the Israeli military, who said on record that the reports from Hamas and the Palestinian Health Ministry about 16,000 dead Gazans are actually relatively correct. It's pretty correct. They also admitted that far more civilians have been killed than Hamas fighters. The idea that Israel is going to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth is truly a non-starter. The idea that Israel is going to get back all their hostages, it could have happened. Hamas put forward the opportunity for that to take place. When before the Israeli invasion began, Hamas told Israel, if you stop the bombardment, we will free all of the hostages. Of course, in return for our own hostages that are being held in Israeli prisons and have been for years without trial, without any charges, without just detention. Israel declined to move forward with those negotiations and instead moved forward with their invasion. Now, one interesting fact about that, Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel just yesterday had a meeting with the families of hostages who are still being held by Hamas, and he told those families, there is no way I'm going to be able to free all of the hostages. The families, the parents, the loved ones of those hostages were shocked. They couldn't believe what they were hearing from Mr. Netanyahu. But they were led to believe that Netanyahu cared about the hostages. They were led to believe that Netanyahu cared about Gaza, the people of Palestine, or the people of anywhere. Netanyahu doesn't care about anything from what I imagine. He doesn't care about anything besides the future of his political career. I know that sounds cynical, but it's the truth. A new report from Haaretz just came out, and we're going to be discussing this tonight with our guest, Max Blumenthal, who's going to be joining us shortly. The article writes, top defense officials in Israel held urgent consultations the night before October 7th about a possible Hamas attack. No one in the IDF notified the Nova Music Festival organizers or the ravers who were present at the festival. You have to ask the question, why? And I think there's a few answers that could be debated, but I don't know if we'll ever really know. I know what's for certain is that the globalists that are pushing to maintain this unipolar world order, they want Netanyahu out as well. They want him out for different reasons, though. They want Netanyahu out of power in Israel because they want a more benevolent leader in Israel. They want a more liberal leader in Israel. Maybe, in fact, even one of the attendees of the Nova Music Festival, they'll run around as a candidate for Prime Minister of Israel next. They want someone leading Israel who's going to carry out the genocide on the people of Gaza in a humane manner. They don't want someone in power who's going to slaughter 16,000 Gazans and make the world, including Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, shake their heads and support the Palestinian resistance. They don't want someone in power who's willing to do such absurd and criminal things that it might just provoke an all-out broader war between, say, Israel and Iran, or Israel and Egypt, or Israel and Turkey. They don't want that. They don't want a leader in power in Israel who's going to bomb the Red Cross, bomb Doctors Without Borders, bomb the United Nations schools, the UN RWA. They don't want that. They want a humanitarian leader that can put a nice face on the genocide. So one of the questions I'm going to be asking Dan Cohen tonight, another great investigative journalist that has worked and actually been in Gaza multiple times, is, are we about to witness the end of Netanyahu's career? Is his time up? We'll have to wait and see. The last subject we're going to be discussing tonight is the situation in Venezuela, which also presents an incredible opportunity for us to look at how the world is changing in this multipolar era. Now, over the cries and the screams of the people of Gaza, you may not have heard about what's going on in Venezuela, but it's actually really, really important. You see, Venezuela is bordered by a country called Guyana. Most people don't know about it. Most people, if you told them that there was a country called Guyana in Latin America, they'd laugh in your face and say you're making it up. But that's actually the truth. Guyana is a country that borders Venezuela, and there's a region of Guyana called Guyana Essequibo. Now, Guyana Essequibo is a region that was stolen from Venezuela by the British Empire years and years and years ago. Venezuela, for years, under the leadership of Nicolas Maduro, tried to engage in dialogue with the government of Guyana to establish some sort of a mediation effort about that disputed territory. They understood that that was rightfully theirs and it was stolen by the British Empire, and Guyana, as a country, inherited it. Now, in 2015, Guyana was able to locate dense fields of oil and gas reserves in the Guyana Essequibo region, again, which was stolen by the British Empire from Venezuela and handed over to Guyana. You wouldn't be surprised if I told you that the entire political leadership in Guyana is bought and paid for still today by the United States and by the British government. You can look at photos of the president of Guyana online, speaking at the Clinton Global Initiative, speaking and meeting with world leaders at the World Economic Forum. He's a globalist pawn and puppet. And that's why just a few months ago, the president of Guyana decided he was going to unilaterally invite ExxonMobil and other major oil monopolies, including the U.S. military, to come into Guyana Essequibo, this disputed territory, and begin stealing the oil. Venezuela didn't like that. Nicolas Maduro wasn't having it because despite all his best intentions and efforts of establishing peace and mediation efforts, the land was stolen, and now it's going to be unilaterally exploited by a U.S. bought and paid for government in Guyana. The oil, the gas will be stripped away, and they will be undercutting Venezuela's oil economy in the process. That's why just this week, Venezuela established a public referendum on the annexation of Guyana Essequibo as the 24th state of Venezuela. Officially, on the Venezuelan books, Guyana Essequibo has now been voted by a broad majority, 97 or 99%. My numbers are correct. For Guyana Essequibo to now become the 24th state of Venezuela. Only problem, this now is potentially going to spark a broader war in the region in which the United States will come in and defend the territory against Venezuela, who's trying to incorporate it back into their country. All of these subjects will be touched in tonight's stories as we dive into our first guest, Max Blumenthal. We're going to be talking about the situation in Israel primarily with him. But make no mistake about it, each story that we address tonight is deeply integral to the changing world order and the multipolar world that is taking shape. First, we have a quick break, though, and we'll be back with Max Blumenthal to discuss the situation in Gaza. This is the mother of all talk shows. I'm Jackson Hinkle. Thank you so much for tuning in.